After his meeting with Roosevelt, the British Prime Minister decides to meet in Algeria with the Allied generals who have conquered North Africa. Marshall, Sir Alan Brooke, Alexander, Eisenhower, and Admiral Cunningham. Together, they analyze the plan drawn up by the Joint Chiefs of Staff in January, which aims to give their forces a foothold on the European mainland. Sicily will be the springboard, and the main objectives are to guarantee the security of the Mediterranean sea routes, drain German forces from the Soviet front, and knock Italy out of the war. Montgomery will be in charge of the British troops, and General Patton is to lead the Americans. The dates set for the invasion are the 9th and 10th of July, during the period when the moon is favorable. Following the disaster in North Africa, the Führer knows that the Italian army is in bad shape, which causes him doubts about the best way to maintain Mussolini in power. After 4 years of war, the Italian dictator, one of the Nazi regime's most appreciated allies, has seen his military strength decimated. Information provided by the German Secret Service suggests a possible surrender on part of the Italian forces. If that happens, Germany will be forced to send troops from other fronts, something the High Command wishes to avoid at all costs. To clarify the situation and to serve as a warning, he calls a meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in Rome. The Nazi leader's fears are not unfounded, given Churchill's plans. The British leader has known for some time that the Italian army is disorganized and exhausted. The German intelligence services know of the enormous deployment of ships and soldiers converging in North Africa and pass on the information to the Axis High Commands. Both the Germans and the Italians are frantically trying to guess the next move of the Allies. They know the offensive against the European mainland will come via the Mediterranean, but where? Well aware of the OKW's doubts and anxieties, the British plan Operation Mincemeat to increase the enemy's confusion. They procure the body of a 34-year-old man to whom they assign a false name and identity, Captain William Martin. On the 30th of April, a submarine leaves the body a mile from the Spanish coast, near Huelva, dressed in a life jacket and uniform, and with a briefcase containing falsified secret documents. The plan is to deceive the enemy into believing the body to be that of a British pilot who has been killed in an accident. At 7 o'clock in the morning, a Portuguese fisherman, José Rey Maria, finds the body floating in the water in the area of Punta Umbria. He quickly informs the Spanish authorities, who in turn pass on the information to the Germans. The name of William Martin appears among the Times list of casualties. Hitler, convinced that the documents have come into his power are real, orders the transfer of reinforcements to Corsica and Sardinia, and Rommel urgently travels to Greece to prepare the army to meet an enemy invasion. Churchill, in the United States visiting Roosevelt, receives a telegram from the General Staff. Mincemeat swallowed whole. Romania's oil refineries are of vital importance to Italy and Germany. When the German soldiers crossed the Romanian frontier for the first time in 1940, they did so not as invaders, but as guests of the government, and were warmly welcomed by the Romanian people. Worried about the situation in Europe, the pro-Nazi Romanian government decided that, in exchange for military aid, they would allow Hitler to control the country's oil refineries. Ploiești and its enormous industrial complex is only one of the 11 such in Romania. These oil installations, situated 56 kilometers north of Bucharest, occupy an area of more than 50 square kilometers and supply almost a third of all the oil required by the German war machine. Here is the source of fuel for the Wehrmacht, the Luftwaffe, and the Kriegsmarine. The Führer knows that Ploiești is the Third Reich's main artery and is indispensable for the German cause. Its protection is in the hands of Luftwaffe General Alfred Gerstenberg, considered by many to be the genius of German air defense. For almost 2 years, oil production has continued uninterrupted. It was not even affected by the first surprise U.S. bombing mission on the 12th of June, 1942. Operation Halvorsen was led by the colonel of that name with a B-24 bomber squadron, but the damage inflicted was insignificant. However, the attack led Gerstenberg to strengthen all the oil field's defenses and link up Ploiești's distinct refineries to one emergency pipeline. In this way, if one was attacked, the oil would continue to flow. Russian prisoners and Romanian workers complete the defensive work with the assembly of a complicated alarm system, capable of detecting enemy planes hundreds of kilometers away. Ploiești is an immense fortress, difficult to attack. In July, the American B-24s land in Benghazi in the north of Africa. Here, at this desert base taken from Ramos Africa Corps only 2 months earlier, the pilots trained for a top-secret mission called Tidal Wave. The objective is to attack the Romanian oil fields with bombers flying at a low altitude. Although the operation received heavy criticism, both Roosevelt and General Milton Arnold, one of the Allied air chiefs, gave their approval. The air crews trained to fly their 4-ton planes at 300 kilometers per hour, only 3 meters above the sand dunes, and models of Ploesti built in the middle of the desert. The altitude is worry for the squadron leaders, but their commanding officer, Major Louis Brereton, orders them to comply with the initial plan, whatever the cost. On the 9th of July, a huge amphibious assault force leaves 6 different ports in North Africa. An hour into the journey, the rough seas cause seasickness among thousands of soldiers aboard. The High Command considers the possibility of aborting the action and returning to port, but both Eisenhower and Admiral Cunningham decide to brave the storm and go ahead. At dusk, following the rough crossing, the powerful Allied armada sights the island of Sicily. Admiral Hewitt, chief of the Navy's Special Operations Group, intends to open fire with a naval barrage in advance of the invasion. But the Army commanders are opposed to this, as they wish to surprise the enemy, unaware that they have been spotted by an Italian reconnaissance plane. Informed of the danger, General Alfredo Guzzoni, in charge of the Axis forces in Sicily, places the 230,000 Italian and 40,000 German troops on the island on alert. The Allies have 2,500 ships transporting 160,000 men from Montgomery's 8th Army and Patton's 7th Army, plus thousands of landing craft, 14,000 vehicles, 600 tanks, 1,700 big guns, 750 warships, and 4,000 planes. On the same night, before the Marines enter into action, 3,000 soldiers of the 82nd Airborne Division under Colonel James Gavin are transported by air. The strong wind and inexperience of the pilots result in the paratroopers not reaching their objectives and being dispersed throughout the southeast of the island. On the 10th of July, Patton's and Montgomery's troops begin the invasion of Sicily. The joint landings take place on the southeast coast, between Syracuse and Cape Passero. The Marines on the Pacino Peninsula hardly meet resistance and take the city before nightfall, while further north, others occupy Syracuse. Some of the U.S. battalions under General Omar Bradley hit the beaches in the south of the island along 24 kilometers of the coast of Licata, Gela, and Skogliti. Their main objectives are the ports and airfields around Comiso, Biscardi, Ponte Olivo, and Licata. General Kesselring intends to block the path of the Allies and orders the tank and infantry divisions to move south in direction of Biscari and Nisemi. The advance of the panzers of the Hermann Göring Division is made difficult by aerial attacks, while the Tiger tanks heading for Biscari manage to eliminate a U.S. battalion, but are unable to stop troops from another wave of landings, penetrating more than 10 kilometers into the interior of the island and occupying the area of Vitoria and Ragusa. At the same time, the Hermann Göring Division, led by General Conrath, together with Guzzoni's men, managed to regroup and undertake a counteroffensive on 3 fronts. One from Ponte Olivo, the second along the road from Nisemi to Pianalupo, and the third in Ponte di Rio. They attempt an enveloping movement to converge on the plains of Gela in order to eliminate the enemy beachheads by nightfall. By the 11th of July, the panzer columns are only 2 kilometers from the beaches. The American soldiers desperately call for help from the Navy. The support ships come to their aid, and the bombardment destroys half of the German tanks and forces the remainder to retreat along with the infantry troops accompanying them. On the 12th, Montgomery's men moved to Caltagirone, Enna, and Leonforte in the central part of the island. In their advance, they clash with a part of the Hermann Göring Division. The Germans, outnumbered and under continual Allied air attack, quickly withdraw to the north of Catania. Meanwhile, General Patton has cleared the northeast of the island for the British forces to approach Messina, the enemy's only possible evacuation point. Hitler, surprised and overwhelmed by the situation on different fronts, travels to the Italian city of Feltre on the 19th of July. The Duce and King Victor Emmanuel are there to receive him with all the pomp and circumstance due to a Caesar. But the Führer is not interested in flattery. Irritated, he reproaches the Duce for his army's lack of valor and preparation, and demands Italy to remain strong, serving the interests of the Axis by defending its territory to the last man. But the Allied invasion and the situation facing the troops of the Reich following the disaster at Stalingrad make King Victor Emmanuel III and the Fascist Council see that a great change is coming. Using the collapse of the Italian economy as a pretext, they vote against Mussolini, forcing him to stand down. He is arrested on the 25th of July. The news is received with astonishment in the Reichstag. The Führer is suspicious of the new government of Pietro Badoglio and tells his secret services to increase their surveillance of the new Italian executive. At the same time, he orders a plan to be prepared to free the Duce and put him back into power. In the first week of August, the Italian forces, aware of Mussolini's situation, crumble in the face of the Allied advance. From now on, the strategy will be different. The defense of the island will be organized to contain the enemy and allow the 3 German divisions to escape to the peninsula. Sunday, the 1st of August. The waiting is over. The 177 B-24 Liberators, which make up the 5 attack groups, wait to take off from the desert airstrip. From the base at Benghazi, a message is sent to the Allied forces in the Mediterranean, informing them that friendly planes are going to fly over the area. German communications experts in Greece intercept the message and decipher its content. At 11:30 in the morning, flying over Corfu, halfway to the objective, the lead bomber has an engine failure and crashes into the sea. Traveling in it was one of the navigators specially trained to head the attack against Ploesti. The B-24 following it carries the second expert navigator, but its pilot is forced to check if there are any survivors from the accident. This seriously delays him, and he returns to Benghazi, leaving the rest of the planes without a specialist to direct them. The crews find themselves disorientated and try to regroup to head for the objective. At 12:20, the German radar station at Ploesti detects the Allied formation for the first time at the moment when the planes ascend to 5,000 meters to fly over the Yugoslav mountains. Gerstenberg, who has already received news from Greece and information from his radar station, is in no doubt that the objective of the planes is Ploesti. The Germans have concentrated most of their anti-aircraft guns to the south of the installations in expectation of an enemy attack from that direction. In the north and east, they have placed less powerful artillery to defend against a Soviet attack. They have also surrendered the refineries, with more than 2,000 generators to send up a smoke screen to prevent them being seen clearly from the sky. Each U.S. plane carries more than 2.5 tons of explosives. The majority are demolition bombs, specially built with delayed fuses. The ban on the use of radio during the whole flight has disconcerted the Allied pilots. Those at the head believe they have reached the target when in fact they are flying over the suburbs of Bucharest and have entered the range of the German anti-aircraft defenses. Major Yuzal Ent, in charge of the operation, realizes his error and breaks the silence. Over the radio, he gives the order to attack indiscriminately. Under heavy enemy artillery fire, the first assault group search for the target and drop their bombs through a thick cloud of black smoke that covers the oil fields. The last waves of planes hardly have time to release their bombs as, beginning their low-level approach, they see below them the bombs dropped by the first groups exploding. Operation Tidal Wave has lasted only 27 minutes. But of the 177 planes that took off from Benghazi, 54 have been shot down, and 34 are lost on the return flight. Only 89 planes make it back to base, and only 31 of these are in any condition to fly. The damage done to the refinery has been minimal, but it remains more than 50% operational. The mission has been an unmitigated failure for U.S. forces, who have suffered a significant number of casualties in what is considered the worst air catastrophe in their history to date. On the 17th of August, General Patton, determined not to allow his rival Montgomery to grab all the glory, sends his divisions against Palermo in the west of Sicily in order to then quickly move east and take Messina. But his triumphant campaign is to be cut short due to his authoritarian and somewhat brutal personality. His commander-in-chief, General Eisenhower, summons him to an urgent meeting to demand an explanation of his behavior during a visit to a field hospital. During the visit, he slapped the soldiers Paul Bennett and Charles Cool, who were suffering from battle fatigue, calling them cowards and threatening to have them shot if they did not go back to the front. Eisenhower forced Patton to apologize to the men. The impulsive and polemical general is able to save his military career, but is demoted from his command of the units of the 7th Army for some time to reflect on his attitude and behavior. Ironically, his inflammatory speeches, which had a certain fascist flavor to them and got him into trouble, were put down to battle fatigue. Sicily has been conquered, and Patton will not be involved in operations on the Italian peninsula. The struggle for the island has only been a prelude to the bloody campaigns that still have to be fought to end Nazism. Marshal Badoglio has skillfully gained time, persuading Hitler that Italy will continue fighting at its side in the war, while secretly negotiating with the Allies. On the 8th of September 1943, the Italian surrender is officially announced. Italian ships sail to Malta to formally surrender to the British. The Führer, upon hearing of the betrayal, turns Italy into an occupied country and immediately reinforces its defenses in the north and center of the country. The Reich forces enter in force at the same time as King Victor Emmanuel III and Marshal Badoglio, together with the government, flee Rome. Hitler knows an Allied invasion of the Italian peninsula is imminent and orders Kesselring to regroup his men and occupy the coastal defenses. The Italian army disintegrates. Most surrender to the Germans or drop their weapons and flee. Uprisings in Naples and Rome are quickly neutralized by the Germans. The widespread popular uprising that Churchill and Roosevelt were hoping for does not occur. The Allied High Command has decided that the invasion of Italy will be carried out in 3 operations. Baytown has as its objective the area of Reggio di Calabria, in the toe of the boot. Operation Avalanche will involve landings in the Salerno area. And Slapstick will target the port of Taranto. Both Baytown and Slapstick are considered as diversionary actions, the main offensive being Avalanche. At dusk, on the 8th of September, more than 100,000 men and 15,000 vehicles leave Sicily for the Italian peninsula. Some hours later, the ships, full of Marines, take up positions in the front of the coast at Salerno. Loudspeakers announcing the surrender of Italy are greeted with cheers from the Marines. But they know that they still have to face the Germans. In the early hours of the 9th of September, Operation Avalanche begins. The landing craft fill up with soldiers and head for the beaches, followed by amphibious vehicles, tanks, artillery, and heavy armaments. Three American and 3 British divisions make up the assault on the west coast of Italy in the Bay of Salerno, 48 kilometers to the south of Naples. The coastal batteries receive them with heavy fire, while the cruisers and destroyers covering the landings respond with continuous fire. On the left flank, the Americans under Colonel William Darby quickly reach the beach at Mariori at 3 in the morning. Not meeting opposition, they advance in search of the road to Naples. A part of the British force under General Robert Laycock disembarks on the coast at Viteri sul Mare, west of Salerno. Not encountering any resistance, they begin their advance towards the interior, but soon find themselves confronted by German troops entrenched in the city, who attack with mortar fire against them and the rest of the force trying to reach the beaches. Engaging in heavy hand-to-hand fighting with the Germans, the British troops managed to reach Salerno, leaving behind them a significant number of casualties. While the fighting continues in the city's streets, other units have disembarked in the southern sector, taking control of the coast, and begun to march on the airport at Monte Corvino. Covering their rear is the British 56th Division, commanded by General Douglas Graham, which engages in heavy fighting with German infantry and armored cars. Repeated calls to the support fleet for help bring about heavy naval and aerial bombardments, which end up dispersing the forces of the Reich. At the mouth of the river Selle, north of Paestum, in the Gulf of Salerno, General Fred Walker's U.S. 36th Division disembarks in the silence of the night. The troops are warily advancing up the beaches when German flares suddenly light up the coast. Bursts of machine gun fire and artillery shells cut short the lives of hundreds of Marines. Walker's men scatter, running for cover behind the sand dunes, while landing craft near the coast and the men inside are blown to bits. The tension is unbearable. The commanders repeatedly shout orders to go on. Finally, they are able to regroup and return fire, opening a path to the railway line that runs parallel to the beach. Meanwhile, on the 12th of September, German paratroopers led by SS Captain Otto Skorzeny carry out Operation Eike, freeing Mussolini from his prison in Gran Sasso and taking him to Germany. From there, Mussolini announces the creation of the Italian Social Republic and his support for Hitler. On the 23rd of September, he returns to the north of Italy and forms a new, illegitimate government in Salo, in the province of Brescia, whose territorial limits stretch to Naples. On this same day, the British 78th Division lands at Bari and advances in the direction of Foggia to take the airfield. On October the 1st, the British occupy Naples and quickly clear the port to allow their ships to land men and provisions. Meanwhile, the U.S. Fifth Army, under General Mark Clark, marches north. On the 2nd, the people of Naples joined the Allied soldiers in forcing out the Axis troops of the new Salo Republic, pushing them back to the German Gustav Line, which crosses Italy from the mouth of the Sangro River on the Adriatic Sea in the east to the Garigliano River on the Tyrrhenian Sea in the west, passing through the area of Cassino. The Tehran Conference takes place from the 28th of November to the 1st of December. It is the first meeting of the Big Three: Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin. In January, the British Prime Minister persuaded the American president to agree to an invasion of Italy. But even though the new Italian government has surrendered unconditionally, the problems faced by the Allied troops in the country are putting a strain on relations between the two leaders, which is to Stalin's advantage. Churchill has warned Roosevelt that Stalin is an untrustworthy and dangerous ally. But the American president, convinced that the Britain's words are motivated by jealousy, does not have the same impression of the Soviet leader. I think that if I give him everything that I possibly can and ask nothing from him in return, noblesse oblige, he won't try to annex anything and will work for a world of democracy and peace. The three leaders agree that in order to relieve the pressure on the Red Army, the other Allied countries will begin a large-scale offensive in the north of France. Stalin has achieved what he has been demanding for some time.